Good afternoon, and welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Disciples and Devotees. Today we are honored to have Kittu Reddy with us to speak on one of the most important topics of our day, the ideal of human unity. Welcome, Kittu.
So first, a brief introduction. As you all know, the First World War started in 1914. That was the first time when almost all the countries in the world were either directly or indirectly involved, against their choice or selectively, according to their choice. At that moment, when the greatest disunity was taking place in the world, here is a gentleman, Sri Aurobindo, who decides to write a book on world unity. I mean, people have asked me, how did he have the daring to propose an idea when the most contrary situation was taking place? So he wrote this book from September 1915. There were 28 chapters, and I think he finished it in July 1918. Of course, he revised it afterwards, but the fundamental principles that he had put forward are unaltered, because fundamentals don't change. Circumstances changed, because when he started the book, Russia was an autocracy. Within 2 years, the revolution took place, etc., etc., etc. So many developments took place which changed the world situation, but the fundamental facts remain. So that is the first thing. Now he himself says the main contentions advanced in this book remain unaffected by events. See, this is the strength of Sri Aurobindo. What he speaks of is always not dependent on the actual situation in his books. When he is commenting in the evening talks and all that, that's a different matter. But here it is unaffected by events because it is based on absolute fundamentals. So the three things that he brings out are the inevitability of the unification of life of humanity because of the natural forces which lead always to the creation of larger and larger aggregates. Now if you look at man's history, first it was the family, then the clan, then the tribe, then the province, then the state, and then the nation, and inevitably, by that same process, it will move towards world unity. That is the first thing. The second thing is the choice of the principles which may be followed in this process. Because when we are moving towards world unity, we have to select the principles on which this world unity will be brought about. Whether it will be under one world government or whether there will be a different form. And the third is the need for preserving individual and group freedom while bringing out this world unity, while bringing about this world unity. Because always when one is living in a collectivity and there is an authority which is inevitable, very often the freedom of the individual is lost. So the need for preserving individual freedom and group freedom, national freedom, the state's freedom, etc., etc. So that is the first thing. The second thing is, this book, and the first few chapters especially, are absolutely packed. I mean, to summarize this book means to write the whole chapter. I mean, there is so much content, right? In other books, sometimes he elaborates, and one can skip a few paragraphs because it is the same idea which he is developing. But here it is very packed.
I would ask, therefore, that you take it very slowly, because people will be
I will take maximum one chapter at a time.
maximum.
Maximum.
Good.
So in the first paragraph of the book, he says, which is very easy, that the surfaces of life are easy to understand. We seize on them, but they do not carry us very far. They suffice for a superficial life. On the other hand, the knowledge of life's profundities demand that we must go much deeper. And as of now, we have found out no plummet which can explore these depths. But it is indispensable, if you want to understand nature's working and ultimate purpose, that we must be able to go there, into that depth. This is the first idea. The second idea is that nothing is more obscure to humanity than the aim and purpose and direction of collective life. Where is this collective life going? What is the purpose of this collective life? It is not clear usually in the human mind. It needs that plummet which goes into the depths. He says sociology does not help us because it just touches the surface. History only records the events as they have taken place, but they do not give us a very clear direction. And I will illustrate this with a personal example. I don't remember the year, I think it was in 1967. There was a feeling in the school that since mother had stopped taking classes and did not have personal contact with the students like before, spirituality is waning. So we have to revive that spirituality. So there was an idea that we will have a project called the Spiritual History of India. In fact, of the whole world, but mainly around India. And so when the matter was proposed to mother hit the table with a bang and said, "No, this will not do. You must start with Sri Aurobindo. First, give everything that he has said. Then after that, if you want to amuse them, you can give them some other thing." But then she added, there have been wonderful things in the past, like for example, the Panis in the Vedas, etc., etc. But the insistence was that start with Sri Aurobindo and then go back to the other thing. So then I wrote to mother, after reading this letter, that mother, I am asked to speak on Ramakrishna and Vivekananda. My project is that. But as you know, that although Sri Aurobindo and you both have admired Ramakrishna very greatly, still his philosophy is somewhat different from ours because there is a kind of rejection of life. So mother wrote back to me in her own handwriting that all study is the study of the past, what has happened. So, how the past has prepared the present, how the present is preparing the future. But the most important thing is the future, where it is going. And for that, you must develop an intuitive capacity by which you will be able to say where it is going. Right? So now this is very important in judging world events, because you put up your hand in despair. Oh my God, somebody wrote to me, oh, what a disaster it is to have Trump, etc., 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 etc. So now if you react to that, oh, you will get disturbed. Instead of that, you must see that there is a purpose and try to find out what that purpose is, where it is leading us to. And ultimately, it will lead us to world unity. Although Trump has asserted nationalism, American nationalism as a foundation of his, right? And Britain, by moving out of Brexit, has again asserted its nationalism. These are trends, but this is nothing to be shaken about. This is where Sri Aurobindo becomes very important, right? So inevitably this world unity will come about. But because 5 people sitting in Brussels were deciding the whole fate of these 28 European nations, they were almost killing nationalism. But nationalism is as necessary. So there was a reaction. Now there will be a kind of reappraisal. And that is how we work, ups and downs, because we don't have that deeper knowledge. Right? So, as he says, history does not teach us anything. We talk of democracy, we talk of socialism, we talk of individualism, we talk of collectivism, we talk of imperialism, we talk of nationalism. And then we espouse a certain cause today. After 5 decades, we espouse exactly the opposite cause. All this happens because we do not have the plummet which goes deep. So the last sentence is important. The moral is not the vanity of human life, of its ardors and enthusiasm, and of the ideals it pursues, but the necessity of a wiser, larger, more patient search after its true law and aim. See, now this is very, very important, because unfortunately, and I would say quite naturally, the newspaper, the TV, the Twitter, today the media is available to everybody. So everybody has opinions about everything, right? With sometimes no knowledge at all. So it is very important that we have a necessity of a wiser, larger, more patient search after its true law and aim. So that is why I tell the students and those who come to me, observe, watch, don't form opinions. Things keep changing, things keep evolving. Read Sri Aurobindo, you will see where it is evolving. And these setbacks sometimes, or apparent setbacks, are really springboards. So you see, when he wrote this book, the First World War was going on. Never before had the whole world been involved in this kind of conflict. But see what happened. Immediately after the First World War, which ended in 1918, in 1919, under the initiative of the United States, which was not involved in the war, but it remained out even afterwards, a League of Nations was formed. What was the intention of the League of Nations? To bring about peace in the world. This war has been terrible. We must not have war anymore. On the day that the League of Nations was formed, almost immediately after that, Sri Aurobindo wrote an article in this book on the League of Nations, in which he severely criticized the League of Nations, that it is bound to end in failure. And he gave two reasons, so we just touch upon them. One was that it was made up of only 50 nations. India was represented by England. Indochina was represented by France, and so on and so forth. And second, that all decisions have to be taken unanimously. Even if one person says no, he has the veto power. The result is it is totally ineffective. He was the only man who had the vision and the courage to criticize the League of Nations, but at the same time he said this is a gigantic step forward, which even if it fails, will inevitably have a sequel, because you have thrown the idea and man will not stop. Once the idea has been thrown, it will have its ripples. It will fail, then you will try again. That might fail, then you will try again. Right? So this is a very important thing. This is very, very important. Because in individual life, as in collective life, you must take the right decision, the ideal decision. You might fail totally, doesn't matter. But the very fact that you have thrown that idea into the atmosphere, both individually and collectively, will gradually build up and take. Sometimes by unpleasant circumstances, we will be compelled, or sometimes by inner aspiration and movement forward. So the League of Nations failed. Hitler came into the picture. The Second World War took place, far more devastating, ending with the atom bombs. And then what happened? The United Nations was formed. See, now this is how nature proceeds, because it is going to reach there, whether by reasonable aspiration of the human being, or by facing you with most opposite circumstances, which will compel you to move in that direction. Right? So this is a very important notion, and that is true for you and me. We have decided to surrender to the Mother. The plain fact is that you can't do it easily. You will find hundreds of parts within us which either don't cooperate or sometimes even outright point blank, as Sri Aurobindo says, say you can go to hell. That doesn't mean that you give up. That means that you have set the path. Now struggle, go on and on and on. And naturally, depending on the intensity of your aspiration and the divine grace, which is the more important thing, one goes up. Right? So it is important to choose a difficult, it might be, but a right ideal. And the higher the ideal, the more difficult it is. A simple ideal, one can manage it. But the higher the ideal, and a spiritual ideal is naturally going to face huge resistance internally and externally. In fact, in one of those talks which I gave the other day, somebody says that I have an aspiration, but if I try to live my life, my friends don't understand me, and their loyalty, my loyalty towards them is threatened. So I said, look, you have to be very careful about what you choose. If you have chosen loyalty to the divine, forget friendships. And almost always, unless you are in the right ambience, they will misunderstand you completely. But if you come down to have their loyalty, then you can forget the divine. Right? You might trip, but again come back. You will trip, but again come back. So it is very desirable to keep a higher ideal in front of you. So this is a very practical utility. And I won't go into details, but I can give personal example of so many of us who continually falling and continually being raised by the mother, continually falling, and that will go on. And she was very patient because you are taking the basic decision. Once you have taken the decision that I will unite with you, then all your problems of the lower nature, which are inevitably bound to come up, she is patient, she will handle, she will be very gentle, sometimes she will be firm, sometimes she will be severe also.
I believe I have read Sri Aurobindo said that the call once taken stands.
Finished. He who has chosen the infinite
Has
is,
been chosen by.
right.
Has been chosen by.
Has
the
been chosen
infinite,
by.
Yes.
He who chooses the infinite has been chosen by the
Right.
infinite.
Right.
So it's finished. Once that stamp has been put on you, then however much time it will take, it is bound to happen. So nature has put that stamp on the world unity. We are going to bring it, she is going to bring it about, this world unity, by some means or the other. Right? Then we have to discuss the principles and all that afterwards as slowly we go along. So now the next thing is very interesting again. Today the ideal of human unity is making its way to the front of our consciousness. Today, even scientific and so many other reasons, the whole world is interdependent. What happens in Spain, Catalonia, is affecting. They are quoting in Kashmir that if Catalonia can become free, why can't we become free? And America, somebody is saying, why can't we become free? Etc. etc. So today everything has become so closely interdependent, and technology has helped us in a huge way to that. The very next thing is beautiful. The emergence of an ideal put forward by nature is not always a sign that it will succeed. She tempts humanity and then hopes little by little that he will come. And then, as I said, sometimes she uses the most unpleasant circumstances, sometimes she uses the higher aspiration to move forward. So, the ideal having made its way in front of thought is going to be one of the determining forces of the future. Every political leader in the world, however much he might assert his nationalism, which is also necessary, must also remember that world unity is imperative and inevitable, and therefore you must work in that line, because then you will be cooperating with nature. Otherwise, blows will come and your nation will suffer. So, while being proud of your nation and working for your nation, also remember that ultimately we have to move in that direction. So, and then he says, and today this was written over 100 years back, today the scientific discoveries and the material circumstances have made the earth so small that its vastest kingdoms seem now like the province of a country. So the world village, as you might call it. But then here is the, since it is the material world, the scientific world, that has brought about this terrific closeness and interdependence, inevitably science means reason. We will try to bring about world unity by reason. And reason works by only one way. It creates a system. A system is a mechanical organization. And as Sri Aurobindo says, when a big change is necessary, if the heart is not ready, this mechanical organization will inevitably collapse. This is very true, not only for the world unity, for every institution. You have to create a system, but you have to be flexible enough. And secondly, you have to create much more an inner feeling of loyalty and towards that institution. That is far more important than rules and regulations. Rules, regulations, they're all very important. But the key thing is that other thing, that inner development, right? As he says, the heart and mind of the race are not ready. Failure may be predicted. So we have to prepare the heart and mind. Every institution has to do this work. Externally create a system, but internally create a situation where the heart and the mind adhere to that system, not by rules and regulations only, but by an inner consent. Now, this is the greatness of, on this depends the greatness of the institution. So, you must be Indians first in heart and mind. Then we'll create a system. We must be followers of the mother in heart and mind. Then the rules will be there. So this is a very important thing. So the heart and mind have to open out towards that larger institution. So as he says, now it is not by social and political devices, or at any rate not by these chiefly or only, that the unity of the human race has to be accomplished. So create a world system for economics, for politics, for social interaction, for everything. Controlling the internet, all that you work. But much more important is to create that psychology. That psychology by which the heart and mind move towards world unity. Then it will become very much easier to not manipulate the system, but to play with the system without destroying the basics, right? So this is very, very important. Next, very key idea. If we do it by these external mechanical means, as it says, life will, and if you look back at history, you see life has been most vigorous, not in large units, but in small units, where there is a lot of independence, a lot of interaction, a lot of movement, and there is growth in culture. So he gives, if we consider the past of humanity, we find that the most interesting periods of human life was when it was lived in small areas, regions. And see the next sentence. Modern Europe owes two-thirds of its civilization to three such supreme moments of human history. So modern Europe owes its whole development to three moments of human history. Ancient Greece, when there was, Pericles' time, tremendous development, and even today Europe swears by that. Ancient Judea, which is called Israel, from where you got the religion of Christianity in due course, and Renaissance Italy, which gave you the intellectual thinking and the artistic efflorescence. So these three movements contributed to two-thirds of Europe. Even democracy was born in ancient Greece. European democracy, because ancient Indian democracy or even Asiatic democracy was quite radically different. Today, in modern Europe, today, whole world, it is the age of reason. Everybody's reason has to be involved in the decision-making process, which is impossible. Therefore, you make a selection or an election by which you make a selection and they decide. Ancient India did not believe that. They believed that every institution, 5 elders, not voted but respected by everybody, that is the panchayat system as it is called, they will take all the decisions, but my neighboring village will have its own panchayat, will take its own decisions, but no election. Because they believe that asking people to elect when they don't have the intelligence to decide what is right is not desirable at all. Do you agree with this even today? India's foreign policy. How can you ask an ordinary man who doesn't understand anything, correct? But naturally the well in your village, the drainage system in your village, the water supply in your village, there you have to be consulted. So the concepts of democracy are slightly different. So he says modern Europe owes 2/3 of its development to 3 such supreme moments. Ancient Greece, which gave it its aesthetics, democracy and the rational faculty, because Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Renaissance Italy, which gave the power of thinking once more, and tremendous art, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and ancient Israel, Judea, which gave you the religion, right? Christianity, which even if it is not dominant today, is still a very powerful factor in the Western world. In the bigger empires, or in the bigger, larger kingdoms, you did not have this creativity. Because the larger kingdom's whole concentration is on administration, on keeping everything together. So that inner creativity is lost and individual freedom is lost. Or lost, not lost, but reduced to a great extent. Because the larger the entity, the more you have to concentrate on administration. The smaller the entity, it's very easy. You can handle it almost, you see. And this I can tell you from my experience in Andhra Bhavan. It's running very well, people are very happy. There are people who want us to expand. They have given a whole guest house to us and said expand and take over all. I refused point blank. The moment I expand to 2 or 3, I said you take our principles. You apply it in your own place, right? So you see, mother, about this school, I mean the kind of infrastructures that you have got, outside they would demand minimum 1,000 students. Mother gave an upper limit of 550, not more than 400. So when they asked her, mother said, you apply the same principles everywhere. Let there be 100 Sri Aurobindo Ashram type of schools, right? That will generate much more than we absorbing a lot and one only, correct? So this is a very important principle. So ultimately she gave the limit as 550, but then after she passed, after a lot of discussion with the playground and school, it was decided around 400, because we can give individual attention in the school as well as in the group. We can give personal attention to everybody, because no 2 people are alike, neither mentally nor even physically. You have a back injury, I have a back injury, but the treatment will be different. Because although it is similar, it is not the same. So but if you have a huge class, it's finished. Unfortunately, the tendency is taking place sometimes. One student came to me and told me, look, I am in a class of 20 and we don't discuss anything, because with 20 people you can't discuss. So he comes to me and all those questions which are not discussed in I have to explain to him. So he comes, he just telephones, I'm coming at such and such a time. I said, come. So you see the importance of small groups.
And in India, you have 100 in a class.
We have 100, the diversity of culture is enormous. And we have 28 states or 29 states. As far as I remember, Mother said there should be many more states. So I think that ultimately we should move on to 45 or 50 smaller states with their distinct individuality and yet merged into the larger whole. Because if you take my state, Andhra Pradesh, the Godavari area on the east near the coast and the Rayalaseema area, we speak the same language, but yet we speak different languages. There is a difference. There is a slight difference of culture also. And now they are broken up into Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, which is very good. I think we have to do that much more. One of the problems that is coming up in India today is Gorkha land. The Gorkhas are Nepalese citizens who are in India. It's a state. It is not a state, it is part of West Bengal. But the Gorkhas have nothing to do with West Bengal. They don't speak Bengali, they don't listen to Bengali music, they have nothing with Bengali culture. It should be made into a separate state. As part of India, but not as part of West Bengal. So like that, if you look carefully, you will find that there are, I won't say pockets, big pockets within a state which have got a distinctive individuality of their own and which must be preserved. That adds to the richness of life. And as Sri Aurobindo says, modern Europe, 2/3 of its civilization has come from those three movements: ancient Greece, ancient Judea, Renaissance Rome. Then he says that he gives the example that when collective life is too diffused, there is administration but no growth.
Thank you, Kittu.